Okay, can you see my screen? Is my screen visible?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Welcome to week 11. All right, welcome to week 11. And today we're going to be looking at flex layouts with gradients, shadows, and multiple columns. Now, these topics have been touched already in the class lesson. But what we're going to be doing today is we're going to create a web page with all these lessons that we've learned from the class lesson. So today I'm going to create content, but first let's have elements that we'll be utilizing to illustrate these topics. I'm going to create a heading. So for this illustration, I want to have flex containers that I will be using to illustrate the flex layout with gradients and shadows. Then I want to have another section that we're going to create a news grid columns. So we're going to make use of the grid columns to design a news section on this same page. So we're going to start first with the flex elements. The elements we're going to use to illustrate the flex layouts. So I'm going to start with a heading. And since we're starting with the flex layouts, I'm going to name this flex layout. We're going to have a class for this heading so we can style it properly. I'm going to leave out this first. Let's just have more content. So next, we're going to have the containers for the flex layouts illustration. So first, we're going to have a parent container where we're going to add the different containers that will be our item, which we will use to illustrate the different flex properties. So we're going to have our first container for our first item, and we're going to name this class item 1. Just going to write item 1 inside the container so we can see that we have something in it. I'm just going to copy this. To make up for the. So we're going to have 3 containers in this particular container, and they are going to be item 1, 2, and 3. All right, next, now we're going to have the section for the news that we're going to illustrate how to make use of grid columns to design a news section. So I want this also to be in a container so I can style them Very well. I want a heading, and this heading will be our breaking news. Well, we can have a class in this heading, so we can apply styles to make it look more like a news header. So I'm going to name this class news heading. And the container we've created for this news section, we're going to call it news container. So let's have our text, and the news itself will be in a separate container where we're going to apply the grid columns to separate to give it a grid. And this will be our text container. Now we don't have any news to give here, so I'm going to just put in fillers for our news. So for this paragraph, we're going to have maybe 2 paragraphs. So I would use fillers. Another paragraph. Okay, so I have used this text to fill up the space. So let's see how the page looks like. All right, now we have the text, we have the breaking news heading, we have the flex layouts where we're going to apply flex properties to these items, and now we can start illustrating how to make use of the flex properties, and also we're going to apply gradients to these properties and shadows using text shadows and box shadows. So let's start designing our web page. All right, to begin with the flex, we have a container which we haven't added the class, so I'm just going to name this container. I'll just add this news heading to this heading. So whatever style we add to the heading will repeat itself. All right, so we have a container for our flex properties, our flex item, sorry, and the name of the class is called container. And in here, to make use of the flex properties, we have to set the display property to flex. And now, once this is done, this would automatically set the display of the items into an inline format. So we're going to add styles to each item so that the item displays properly. But first, we want to make sure that the parent container, which is this container that holds all the items, has its display to be flex, and also to prevent any of the items to display outside this container. We're going to use the flex property called flex wrap. I'm just going to select it here. So with the property, the value we set we want here is that we want it to be wrapped. So we don't want it to exceed out, because we're going to be trying different flex property like the flex grow, flex basis. So this will change the shapes and size of the sizes of the items. So we don't want it to be displaying outside the original container. So we use the flex wrap, and we want all the items to have spaces around them. So we can use the justify content, and we say want them to have space around, and then all the items should be in the center, not bottom or top, so at the center. And then we also want that the margin for top and bottom should be 20px, and the width can be auto, so it will be automatically adjusted however the contents expands. And then we also want the width of the container to be 80% of the screen, and we're going to let's add the border, so we see the border of that contains all the items. So we're going to use the border property. The line, it shouldn't be too much, so we use 2px solid and a gray color. Now finally, let's add the padding, and want all sides to have 10px. So including with the space around, we're also going to have this padding to make sure that there's no space inside the container. So now we have all the properties applied to the container. We have the display to be flex. It's now an inline display, and the wrap property to make sure that when we start applying the flex properties to these items, that it does not exceed the container, and justify content space around to make sure that there are equal space between them, so we can easily spot and see how they behave. All right, Emmanuel, you have a question?
Yes, I have a question. Please,
Okay.
you see, after the style, you open the first tag. What is the meaning of the media is equal to screen? Like,
oh, okay. So this is usually suggested by the Atom ID. It's really if it's not there, it doesn't really make much difference. But what it says here is just the style. So the media is set to screen. So it makes sure that everything is displayed properly, just enhances the styles, and each of the properties we apply here is well presented on the screen. But
even if it is not there, it is still going to work.
Yes, it is. It's not.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's usually suggested. Okay. All right. Now, for the next, we want to start changing the display of the items. So this is where we're going to look at the different flex properties to position contents or elements on the web page. So first we have item 1, we have item 2, and we have item 3. So I'm going to create these classes here. Then item 3. Okay, so I want something unique that they all have in common. So I have to create another class that I will use to make sure that they all have one style in common. But in order for us to have the flex property illustrated properly, we don't want to be adding too many styles to each item. So I'm just going to create another class where I would add designs that are unique to all of them, and I'm calling it item. So it will come first. Okay, so I want to have a general style for all the items. So to be 100 px. So this is going to be the default width before we start applying the flex properties to adjust each content, each item's size. And then we want the height to be 100 px. That's the perfect square. And the margin 10 px around them. And they should all have background color. So here we're going to look at the box shadow. So let's make use of the box shadow here. So to apply shadow to an element, here I'm going to refresh the page so we'll see how the items are displaying already. So we have the width set, the height and the margin of 10 px, and also background color of gray. Now I want to apply box shadow to the items, so they're going to have a shadow behind them. Now to do this, we use the box shadow property called box shadow, and in the box shadow we're going to specify the values that we are going to use to create this shadow. So how does the shadow work? We have different parts of this container that we want to apply shadow to. So the first part is the vertical part, and the first value we'll give here will be for the vertical shadow, so which is we're going to make use of 2px. So this would tell how much the shadow would shift on the vertical side, how much of the shadow we are going to be seeing on the vertical side of the container. And then for the horizontal shadow, we use 2px as well. So you don't want it too much, so it doesn't look too obvious, and it gives away the idea we're trying to create. So next, we want to have the blur, so it makes the shadow less transparent, a bit lesser value transparency. So the blur now would be 5px, and then I want to set the color. So I'm going to use the hexadecimal color, so the lighter shades of dark. Let's take this. So you see the shadows are behind the container, and you can see how it looks different now. So now we have a uniform style for the container. Now let's start positioning these items using the flex properties. So we use the flex property to apply flex values. So the flex property is going to be our shorthand for flex grow, flex flow, flex wrap, flex string. So if we intend to use all these values we have here, we can impute them with just the property flex, and then we specify the other properties inside with its values. So we want to first of all try out. We're going to look at the shorthand first, but we can first of all try each one of them first to see how the display would look like. So to box 1, let's make use of the flex grow, and we'll set it to 1. And we see that it grows. It grows with a space of times 2 of the other containers we have here. So let's say we want to use what can we use? Let's use the flex shrink. So this also has a way it adjusts itself according to the responsiveness. So you can see that once the screen is being reduced, we see that the size of the item 1, which flex grow 1, is still trying to adjust, but as there's more space, it's going to take up the space as much as there is available space for it. So that's how the flex grow works. So let's look at flex shrink. So I'm going to set the shrink to 0. For item 2. Okay, I want to add flex base. So I'm going to set this to 2 and see. So this is going to make sure that for item 3, I'm going to include the number 3. There's the page. So this is going to make sure that the item 3 has a default size that would always remain where it is. Once the size, even if we have more spaces, so you can see that it remains at the same flex base that we set. So now we want to apply these properties as a shorthand to each of the items. So I'm going to take out this. And here, the shorthand, the first value there is for the flex row, the second value is for flex string, and the last would be for the flex bases. So I want to see how this affects the page before we use the shorthand. Alright, so let's apply the shorthand to the flex property. So the first value here is for the flex row. So we want the flex row to be 2, and the flex string will be 1. And the flex base. So I have a correction. The flex base usually has a unit that's added to the value. So we have to set the base for the item. So for this base, I'm going to make it 100 px. So let's see how item 1 displays. So you see that the shrink, once we have it reduced, because of the flex row, it's always trying to take up more spaces that are available on the container, and the base we set as 100 px would remain as the default size for it once the spaces are no longer available. But also the flex shrink makes sure that it also shrinks too as well, just like the others on the page. But if we remove the flex shrink, it's going to maintain the 100 px size that we set as default. So let's apply a different property to the item 2. So this would be the grow would be 1, and the shrink would be 2, and the basis would be 150 px. So now the grow has made it increased, and the shrink now has been set to 2. So let's see how the shrink works. So because the default we have set is 150 px, it does not go below, even though we set the shrink to 2, it does not reduce below the 150 px, so it stays at 150. And the flex wrap makes sure that everything is still contained inside this container. So no item is outside the container, even when the screen is reduced. Alright, let's try another property for item 3. So this, we're going to use a grow of 3, and the shrink of 1, and the flex base of 120 px. So the grow is going to be more than the other items because it has the grow of 3. So it's going to take more spaces than the item with 1 or 2 groups. So you see it's 3, 2, 1. So the third item tends to take more spaces because we set the property of the flex group to 3. And then also the shrink as 1 and the default size at 120 px. So when we reduce, it's going to maintain where if there's no space, it's going to maintain 120 px. But if there's space, it takes up the whole space. So this is one way we can apply this flex property to elements on the web page. We could have maybe these items as divs that holds maybe images or some text areas on our web page. But here we're just using containers and containers with borders to just display how we can position them properly. So when we want to have a responsive page and you want when the page screen reduces or increases that the elements are adjusted accordingly in a responsive manner to the page. So we can also add more position property in this item. We can make use of the order. Now the order property just tells the browser where to position the item. So if we use the order property, and here we have 3 items, but we want, let's say we want item 1 to go to the last part, so we can say the order should be 3. And we want the item 2 to go to remain the same. Let's leave the item 2 where it is. Let's shift the item 3. And this one should first container. So refresh. Now we have 2. Okay, I'm going to set for this to remain number 2 position. So item 2 is going to remain at the middle. Then item 1 has gone to the back because we set the order to 3, and item 3 is now at the front from the left because we set the order to 1. So this is how we use flex layouts to position elements on the web page. So let's add more restrictions here. We're going to try out gradients. So let's see which of the items we have, the content we have on the page that we can add gradients to. We're going to create a class. Let's add gradients to the items. So let's have a class called gradient. And let's have different gradients. We're going to illustrate a different gradient property. So I would call this gradient 1. And this gradient 2. And this gradient 3. So first we're going to start with the gradient 1. So how do we add color gradients to our web page or on any particular element? First we want to look at linear gradients. So we use the background property for this. There are different ways we could apply this, but we can make use of the background property. And in the background property, we want to specify the color type, and we're using the linear gradient. And inside the parentheses, add the value for it. And for the linear, we can write the value in degrees. So this is going to tell at what degree we want the linear to flow to. So by default, the linear is from the left to right. So, but we want it to flow at a degree of 45 degree. So we set this to 45 degree. And inside the parentheses, we specify from what color to which color we want the smooth transition to go to. So I'm going to use hexadecimal colors, FF 0000. So I'm going to save this, and we'll see how gradient 1 is looking like. So you see now we have a red and a green. So it's instead of the default left to right, but it's moving from a 45 degree angle from the same left to right. So that's how we can make use of linear gradients. So for the second item, let's look at another type of gradient. And this is for our gradient 2. We use the background property. And this time we want to look at radial gradients. Just like the linear gradients, inside the pair of parentheses, we want to specify how this color smooth transitions is going to move. So we want this to be in a circle. So the radial, we can specify the different style for the radial. Here we're going to use circle. And we want to set the color that it's going to flow from. And the color it's going to flow to. Now we have the view and yellow color in a circle transition. So this is radial gradients in a circle transition. So you can see the smooth transition from blue to yellow in the middle. Alright, so you can always refer back to the class lesson to see how these were also illustrated for more information. So let's move to the next gradient. And this will be for gradient 3. For gradient 3, we're going to use conic gradients for the background color. So set the background, and we say we want to use conic gradients. And also want to specify the transition direction. So we say we want it to transition from 45 degree and then we give the amount of space we want this conic gradient to content. So we say 50%, 50%. And the color we want the transition to move from. Let's see how this displays. So how we were able to do this is that we set the flow at 45 degrees, just like we did for item 1, but this we selected the percentage of the area that we want the colors to contain. So this is 50%, 50%, and the color transition type. So the thing is that several ways we can do this, but you have to explore to see the best that works well for you. So you don't have to always memorize them, but you can always have like a reference sheet that you can use whenever you need to apply these gradient colors. They can be quite complex sometimes when you want a particular style, a particular color design. All right. Let's look at shadows. We're going to apply some more shadows to the content we have on the page. Well, we're moving to the new section. So I should have done this. So I want to apply style to the body of this page. Let's make sure that the fonts family so it affects the news. I want to set the font family to I'm going to type this here. Vertical from sans serif. And just to make the page looks better, let's add a background color. Now the fonts are looking better, and we have a light gray background color as well. So let's work on the text, the paragraphs, before we apply the grid column to it. So we want the paragraph to have margin of 0 at the top, 0 margin at the bottom, but from the left we want 10 px and 0 from the right. And also we want to have a line height just so the texts are well displayed. Line height of 1.6, so it doesn't stay too much. So just like the normal Word text format where you set the line height in your Microsoft Word, so it's the same as what we have done here. So it's usually 1.5, 1.0 for very small lines. So 1.6 is good enough space. All right, now we can start adding the multiple columns to the text area. So we have the news container, which is the first container we're going to start with. I'm just going to copy this out. And now we want the news container to have a width of 80% of the screen of the container it's in. Okay, so since it's not a container, it's going to have 80% of the body of the page. The margin. So we want a space around the container of 20 px, top and bottom, and also for as much as the columns is going to expand the container, so it should be automatically adjusted. But we want a 20 px space from top and bottom, and it should have a background color. We can also have a border radius, not too curved, just 10 px should be enough. And for the text inside, should have a padding of 20 px top and bottom, and 20 px left and right. And lastly, we can include the box shadow to the whole container. I'll use the RGBA color for this. If I save this, we're going to have all these properties: the width of the container, and the margin from the body to the container, and the background color, which is white, and the padding for the text 20 px, and a little shade of box shadow, not so obvious, but just enough to give the difference. All right, let's add style to the heading so it looks more like a news heading. So we've created the news heading class. We're going to apply style to it. We also want the font family for this. Let's change the font to Area. And the font size should be big and clear enough so it shows as a heading, like a news headline. Let's give it a color, something between brown and gray, and as well as a box shadow, text shadow. So the text shadow is the same syntax as the box shadow, and it's going to be for this going to be 2 px from vertical side to 2 px horizontal. The blur should be 4 px, and the color. So let's see how this displays. Yeah, now we have a well-designed breaking news as heading, and now we can add the columns we want the text to be divided in. So we have a class for the text called text container. So we want to set the columns that the text is going to be divided in. So we use the property called columns. And this is also the shorthand for the different columns property. So we want to specify the number of columns and the width in this shorthand. So the number of columns is 3. We want the text to be divided into 3 columns, and each of those columns should have a width of let's give it 150 px. So let's look at how this displays first. So we have the width 150 and the 3 columns we have specified. So let's make it look better. We can add the column gap. So the column gap, we can specify the size, the value that we want, which I want 20 px. So this is going to be the gap between the columns. So if I refresh this, you see it's adjusted, not much because it's 20 px. But if I make this much, you can see it increases. So it depends on the value you give. Now, last, we want to have a column row. Now, a column row is just like a line divider that is just going to display between the columns to easily demarcate which column the text is belongs to. So that we use the column row. And just like the border property, we can decide how much width we want for the column, for the row. So here, the row should have a width of 2 px, and it should be solid. It could be dotted, just like the border properties, and we specify the color as well. So let's look at the row between the. Now we have a column row, and we have 3 columns on this page. So we've made use of the flex properties, we made use of gradients, and made use of the grid column property as well. So this is one creative way we can design a page with the flex layouts, the gradients, and the grid column. So I want to apply the style to our heading. To make sure it displays properly. I'm going to add the text align to the center. And we have it